Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It's now 10:35. My name is Dennis Ostick. I have the privilege of being the current chairman of our town's Economic Development Connect Communities Committee. I now open the public information meeting for a broadband expansion project on November 7, 2019. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day and attending this meeting. If you could allow me now to read the public information notice. Public notice is hereby given that on Thursday, November 7, 2019 at 10:30 a.m., the Economic Development Connect Communities Committee of the Town of Boulder Junction will hold a public information meeting at the Boulder Junction Community Center in the Boulder Lake Room. The purpose of the meeting is to allow information to be presented regarding the expansion of affordable and high-speed internet in Boulder Junction, and to answer public questions and comments relating to this topic. The public is encouraged to attend and participate in the meeting. A quorum of town board members and other town committee members may be in attendance at this meeting for information gathering purposes only, and no town board or town committee action will be taken at this meeting. Thank you. The Economic Development Connect Communities Committee and its broadband work group have dedicated countless volunteer hours exploring the opportunity to provide affordable, reliable, high-speed internet to Boulder Junction. In one fashion or another, the internet touches each of our lives. Some say that high-speed internet is no longer a luxury. Others suggest that it is necessary. It is as necessary, please sign in, as electricity to our future progress. Still others say that the internet does not contribute to our community. The decision on this question is truly yours alone. The information you will receive describes a valuable opportunity available to our community. We are fortunate that the research and legwork conducted over the past 9 months coincides exactly with our state's plan to bring broadband access to those parts of our state that are most in need of assistance. Thank you. Our town has been presented with an opportunity. Let me now ask Bill Nemeth to describe the details. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Cold. Little story before I get started. I'm kind of new school, kind of old school. Old school, I always write. I always write my notes, although I can't read them. I forgot my notebook this morning. So this is not a prop. I have notes on it. So thanks for coming today. What I want to say is, before we start, this is the 6th informational session that we've had on this subject. We've had really, really great participation, and we've had great feedback. We're going to have number 7 tonight. During the last session, we asked for your feedback, and I want to tell you a little bit about that feedback. We had 3 options. One was a single year project for about $7.5 million. The other was a multiple year project, with the first year being a fairly small area around the business district at $1.9 million. And then we had, do you support doing nothing? Our survey responses were 23 for the 1-year $7.5 million project, and 26 responses for the $1.9 million multi-year project, and 0 for doing nothing. That is, so that told us as a work group that maybe we need to kind of change our thinking a little bit. We're going to give you the opportunity to give us some more feedback today. Will it be the same? Will it be different? Not sure, but we have adjusted the options a little bit. So I wanted you to know that we're listening to the community's feedback. And Steve and Dennis and others have just done a tremendous job in reaching out, listening, and we're adjusting the best we can. Okay. All right, well, here's our agenda. We've shared with you a lot of background information. We'll do that if we need to, but many of you have been here before. You've seen the background information. Today, we're going to do a couple of things, but really blast right into it. The first one is we'll tell you a little bit about the status and where we are, talk about the options and the costs that we have and that we're presenting to you today. Talk about a potential 2020 project that may change based upon your feedback, some pros and cons, Q&A, feedback, and then talk about next steps. And if we need to kind of go back to the beginning, we have that information as well that we can share with you. Here's where we are. The Economic Development and Connect Communities Committee has been working on this subject for a year. Started in November of 2018. So far, we've conducted 5 public information meetings. We have received and refined estimated cost savings and conceptual designs from CenturyLink. We've explored other options. There aren't a lot of other options out there, but we've explored those options. We're sharing the status with you today, and we're getting close to the point where you will need to make a decision about the future of this project as it relates to Boulder Junction. Okay? As Dennis said, this is an opportunity. And as many of you know, we've been talking with the Public Service Commission and their grant. So let me just tell you a little bit about that grant. For the next 2 years, there's $48 million in state funding for the expansion of high-speed broadband in the state of Wisconsin. For 2020, there's $24 million. That $24 million is more money than the previous 6 years combined. This is the opportunity. And it's been a challenging goal because there's been a lot of work to do, and we're always kind of reaching, we're always kind of hoping that we're a little bit closer to what we are, but we've done a tremendous amount of work. We've worked closely with CenturyLink, and we're right there. We are right there. We're not like way behind, we're right there. We're right where we need to be. So let's talk about our opportunity. Steve is going to explain some of these areas as well, but we have 3 options that we're sharing with you today. And Steve, if you'd come up and help me talk through this, please. Let me, we're going to go back and forth and tag team this, but let me first of all talk about option 1. Option 1 is phase 1 of a multi-year project, and it focuses on our most highly dense areas. And we'll show a map here in a moment. You might say that that's the best bang for the buck, and it really is. There's no question about that. And we've had to kind of go back and forth to get that right. So it addresses the village, what CenturyLink is referring to, the village. Boulder Junction northeast. So if you find the center of Boulder Junction, it's kind of like this, the northeast quadrant, where the majority of the residents live in the township of Boulder Junction. It then also includes an area of South Trout Lake and Man Lake. This is an unserved area. The speeds are really negligible. There's really no internet to speak of. That's critical for us to begin to address those areas. And then there's these access points that we'll tell you more about. And I must stress, this would be the first phase of multi-phases, and we'll give you a potential timeline here in a little bit. And then Steve's going to talk us through the numbers. The second option, and we listened to you, and we were surprised. We were surprised on the amount of support to do all of this in 1 year. Wow, that's that really shows something. So we've kind of adjusted the option and the proposal. Instead of a 1-year project, a 2-year project. So to cover the entire township with fiber optic internet to the premises in 2 years. That's option 2. And then option 3 is to do nothing. So Steve, why don't you talk through, and then just let me know when you want me to pivot to the other slides.
Absolutely. Everybody hear me okay? So what everybody needs to know is these are fiber to the premises projects. This is no longer DSL, which is what we're all served by now. So I know there's a lot of misinformation out there that people think it is a extension of DSL. This is fiber to every premises within the township. So I want to be clear on that. Another thing we need to talk about is the grant funding piece, because that really has kind of driven what we've done here. Dennis and Bill have been to many public service meetings, seminars, and because of the amount of money that's in there, and $24 million is what they're going to give the first year and the second year, there's a limit to what we think they're going to be able to give us. And so it didn't do any of us any good to come up with a $3 million plan where they had to throw in $3 million when we thought they'd only give us 1.25, which is where we were or are. And so both of these plans are driven by around 1.25 million per year, because we think that's the realistic maximum that the Public Service Commission would be willing to give us. And so that's why we're where we are. It's also the reason that this plan here isn't a 1-year plan, because we listened and we said, okay, 1-year plan, we'd love to get it done in a year, but if we did that, we know we'd still only get a maximum of 1.25 the first year. So if we draw it out another year, that would save the township potentially 1.25 million, because we get 1.25 the first year and 1.25 the second year. So that's kind of where the plans came from. Let's look at the map here. This is our first option here, and I just kind of want to show everybody what areas we're talking about covering, and kind of look at what it looks like as far as access points, because that can be a little bit confusing. Yep. So here's the map of the entire township. So these shaded areas here are areas where we're going to do a comprehensive plan and run fiber to the premises throughout that entire area. So this is the area that Bill was explaining is the major part of the township, and then going to the northeast. And that covers, a lot of living units, which is how we kind of define it. A living unit is a business, a house, anywhere there could potentially be fiber service. And so that's that area. This area down here is the unserved area of South Trout and Man Lake. So we kind of felt like we had a dual mandate of serving as many people as we could to get the most value we could for the taxpayers. But then we also felt that we had a responsibility to the people that had virtually no service. And so that's why this is kind of a combination of the two. Now the next piece of this
and
is
Steve, before you move on, there's another benefit of doing this area as well. Right now, I think most of you know we don't have redundancy with our internet. We have no redundancy. Doing this section gets us closer to some element of redundancy The step then would be to take the fiber down and connect it here, and we have some element of redundancy.
So what redundancy is when the internet goes down, i.e. this morning in a lot of places, right? There'd be another route for the information to get out and back once we get out to 51. So it would fail over is what it's called. Once it went down, let's say between here and Manitowish Waters, it would then fail over to this area here. It's really important for businesses that can't be down to have some sort of redundancy. So that's what that does. So Bill's right, that gets us to this intersection here. So all we have to do is cover that 3 miles or so, and then we would have some redundancy. So that's a good thing. The red dots. The red dots are what are called access points. And an access point is a spot where you can connect to the fiber, right? So within these areas here, there's necessarily access points because obviously we're connecting everybody within those shaded areas. Beyond that, we know that there is already fiber run throughout the township, roughly 62 miles. So we felt that it would be prudent to put access points along that area to allow existing customers to hook into fiber if they could. Now it's going to be predicated by how dense the area is, and that's where CenturyLink is going to determine where those access points go. Wouldn't make any sense to put an access point at a spot where there's only one house, right? But if it's a spot where there's 5 or more houses within a fairly condensed area, they're going to put an access point. And those people would be able to get fiber in year 1. If it's anybody that is outside of 600 feet, they would still be able to hook on, but they would have to pay for anything over the 600 feet. So that's how that works. Okay, Bill, you can go back. One of the important things to note too is these are all pre-engineered plans. The locations of the access points are not where they'd really be. That was just kind of a way to kind of show people what that would look like, potentially. So living units, again, we know a living unit is anybody that might take internet. 919. There's 1,353 in the entire township. So this phase 1 would cover 68% of the LUs in the entire township. So obviously that's good bang for the buck. Project cost is about $3.1 million. CenturyLink's going to throw in $715. Grant funding is going to be about 1.2. Be about 1.2 for the township. So the cost per living unit is about $1,300. Does anybody have any questions on the phase 1? Yes.
Does that price include the connection, once you get within the 600 feet, the equipment that's needed on the residence?
Correct, yes. Yeah, there's an ONT device that needs to be in the house, and that's really the equipment you're talking about, but it'll include the running of the fiber and the ONT device in the house. So it's basically everything you need to hook up.
Even if you're farther than 600 feet?
Even if you're further than 600 feet, you'd have to pay for the additional fiber. The ONT device, I believe, would be covered, but I need to get some clarification on that.
Do you have that footage cost at this point?
$188, $1.88 a foot. And that's as of a week ago. You know, who knows what it'll be next summer, but it's going to be somewhere between $1.75 and $2, I would guess. The other thing we did too here in the 2 right columns is give everybody an idea of what the tax impact would be, and basically let's see, Dennis, I'm going to have you talk, or Bill, I'm going to have you talk about that since you drew that up.
Yeah, so we worked with Laura Birch and with Baird to come up with a projection on what the tax impact would be for the township. And it is cut off here a little bit. So the impact per 1,000 is 14 cents if we take out a 20-year bond. It's 21 cents if we take that bond out for 15 years. Moving that over, the impact, and we selected a $200,000 property just because, you know, they're higher and lower. So the impact per year on a $200,000 property for a 20-year bond is $28. For a 15-year bond, it rises to 45. So at 5 years, you can see that does make a difference. So that's there. Why don't we talk through option 2 and then we'll come back.
So option 2 is going to be a commitment from the town to do basically the entire township in 2 years. So the difference between 1 and 2 is 1 is we have flexibility in the future to do it as we see as financially prudent. There's risks in that that we'll talk about in a bit. This one here is doing the whole thing in 2 years. So we would cover the entire township. Estimated cost is 7.5 million. CenturyLink's contribution is 1.2. So CenturyLink determines their contribution based on the number of living units. So we know that there's only 32% of the living units left after we do this one. So the contribution is much less from CenturyLink because they're covering less people. This area here is what we talked about. We figure 1.25 is about all we're going to get out of the Public Service Commission. In 2 years, obviously, that's 2.5 total. That leaves the town with a bill of 3.8 as the difference. So cost per living unit is 2,800 compared to 1,300 for phase 1. Now, I think it's important to note that even if we did this one, we're still tasked with covering the rest of the township, right? So likely this number would go up when covering the rest of the township regardless, because it's the longer runs of fiber, it's the more remote areas that just could be more expensive to do. Percent coverage, 100%. So we'll talk about the pros and cons a little bit of each of those. Does anybody have any questions on the numbers? Yes?
If for some reason grant funding were not available or came in at a much lower rate, you got numbers for the tax burden in that case?
You mean if we decided to do it anyway?
Yeah.
We didn't do, because I guess there's a lot of different scenarios you could draw up, and we could do that exercise, and maybe it isn't a terrible idea. But yeah, I mean, there'd be, if the tax money didn't come in, we'd have to decide, well, are we gonna do it anyway and just pay for a larger percentage of it, or are we gonna scale the project back? There'd be a lot of decisions that needed to be made, that I don't think we would be at liberty to make ourselves. So hopefully it won't come to that, but if it did, we would have to figure out where we wanted to go. We're anticipating getting the funding, but you're right, there's no guarantee.
Is CenturyLink's contribution part of their grant funding they might get, or is this independent of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're gonna throw that amount in regardless, right? Is that what you're asking? Regardless of the amount of grant funding that comes in?
Well, if CAF 3, if CenturyLink goes out to get some funding for CAF 3, is that part of your contribution you listed up there?
Well, if they went out for CAF 3.
Steve, can you explain what CAF 3 is?
Yeah, I should. All right, so that's federal funding. That's the Connect America Fund. We know right now we have 62 miles of fiber within the township, which powers our DSL. That was all done with CAF 1 and CAF 2 funding. So those are federal funds designed to get fiber out into rural areas. CAF 3 is coming in a few years. That's one of the reasons we found this one somewhat appealing, is that we say, okay, well, maybe in the next phase, we can use a combination of PSC and CAF 3 funding to finance future years. But I mean, the caveat there is we don't know what CAF 3 is going to be. We don't know what funding we're going to get. So, there's risk in all of it.
The reason I'm asking is that if CenturyLink in 2020 goes out for CAF 3 funding, they have to take our existing 10 megabytes per second and increase it to 25. That's the requirement.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So if they do that, then what's their contribution additional? Because now you're telling us in the last meeting, most of us will get a minimum of 25 for residents. So if CenturyLink under CAF 3 is going to do that, we're kind of redundant. So there should be some money coming back to us.
Let's answer it like this. We don't know. We don't know what CAF 3 is. We know that CAF is probably going to start in 2020. CAF 3 is going to start in 2021. This project would be mainly done before CAF 3. This one, we would likely be in that CAF 3 area. The bottom line is we don't know. And all we can spend all day speculating, but we don't know.
Based on what you talked about last meeting, regardless of the CAF 3 funds, this connecting to residential areas, this is brand new. That has nothing to do with how much funding they got. They didn't do it when they had the funding before. what they're putting in here, this contribution is a pilot program, is it not? It's kind of independent of any funding they
Yeah,
get anywhere else.
let's answer it like this, all right? This CenturyLink contribution is their investment for the project. And it's what they feel they can invest and still get profit.
And it's a unique project for them, this isn't something they've done before.
This is
No.
a first of a kind.
So regardless of the cap funds they've received in the past, this isn't something that they've done.
Yeah, and it's important to note that CAF three funding, or CAF funding, is and will be driven by speed, right? So the technology that's deployed is kinda gonna be driven by the speed, because the last one that came through was 10 and 1, so 10 download speed, 1 up. So that was the minimum that they had to provide throughout the township, and that's what they did. So the majority of our township is 10 and 1. Future ones, 25 and 3 maybe for CAF three, maybe as much as 50 and 5. If they go up to 50 and 5, boy, it's gonna be tough to do DSL, and they might have to run fiber to the home, so, yeah, but nobody knows that yet. Or,
You're talking apples and oranges, because this is what speed to the house?
this is, okay, so this is fiber to the premises, so a gig is kind of where they, you could get more than that, potentially, but a gig is kind of where they max out. The gig is more than any of us in our homes would ever use, and it's a symmetrical service with a gig up and a gig down.
So it's not 25 speed that we're talking up here, we're talking a gig.
Absolutely.
Well, let's clarify that though, because it kinda depends upon what you select as a consumer.
True.
Okay? I believe that the entry level for CenturyLink with fiber is 25.3.
Yeah, correct.
And then you can select 50-10, and then to Steve's point, you can go up to 1 gigabit, which is 1,000 megabits, all right? You can go up to 1 gig, and then you have 1 gig down and 1 gig up. It's symmetrical service.
And so the way CenturyLink is marketing it today is they're marketing the gig, right? So they're saying, okay, we're gonna sell you a gig up and down because we know you'll never use it, but we might as well sell it to you because you're gonna want it, right? And they're selling it for like $65. So if they thought everybody was using a gig, you know, they would never sell it for $65 because their system would never accommodate it. But they know most people are only gonna use 50 or less, and so they can sell the gig.
But kind of the point of some of this though is for, revitalizing the area for new business, so that gig up and down for 90% of the people in here, you're never gonna use it, but for somebody that's opening a business that can run it out of their house, they're absolutely gonna use it, and that's gonna be high-end income. That's small businesses coming in here that are gonna employ 10, 15 people that are now gonna be making enough money to potentially be covered full benefits, $50,000 to $70,000 incomes. That's a huge change. So that unused space for most of the people will be used by business owners and schools.
Absolutely.
Okay, presentation's done.
Just to be clear, you're saying only $28 a year potentially, or 45 or 72 or 140 to the individual taxpayer?
That's correct.
Only-
Based on the 200.
That's on a
based on
200,000.
200,000.
Okay, but, I mean, 28 to $100 a year, okay, that's all we're talking about?
It
Yes.
is.
Okay.
And if you switched from, DirecTV and CenturyTel that you have now,
You're gonna pay
you're gonna pay less than that, by a long shot.
There's that, there's the increase in property values, there's, yeah, a myriad of reasons to do it, no doubt.
The other caveat that you would need if you were beyond the 600-foot limit to pay for that initial hookup.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Annie?
Have you done a study to see how many people are beyond that 600 feet?
Well, we don't even know where the access points are, so it'd be premature to do that. What CenturyLink did, and it was their recommendation, was to say, let's find out how many locations there are where there's five homes or 5 living units within a 600-foot radius of a potential access point. And that's where they stuck them. And they didn't spend a whole lot of time on that map we looked at. So once it's planned and engineered, then the access points will be where they are. And at that point, yes, you would be able to determine who's beyond the 600 feet.
So if they're within 600 feet, they get hooked up.
They do, correct.
And that's in the first
That would be if we did the phase project, exactly.
When you say a living unit, you're including seasonal living units.
Absolutely, yep. Any potential spot where they could hook up.
We had another question here.
Yeah. So the burden, I don't want to say, the cost to me as a taxpayer, that's the only cost, or is there additional cost I have to pay CenturyLink every year?
That would be it unless you're beyond the 600 feet of the phase one of the access point project.
Well, you have to sign up for the service, you have your monthly.
Yeah, obviously you're gonna have to pay CenturyLink for the service, but there wouldn't be any cost in the connection.
What's that gonna cost?
Yeah, do we know?
The CenturyLink?
Service fee.
Yeah.
Right now they're advertising a gig for 65, and I think that 25 was 55. And so it changes all the time. If you go online and look, they're constantly changing their pricing. But, you know, it's hard to say. At this point, it seems like it's gonna be really, really reasonable to the point where most people would say, well, for 65, I might as well just take the gig, and that's kind of their theory, is we might as well advertise the gig so we can get the maximum amount out of it, and then know that most people are never gonna use it.
And we can go back there because we have the slide we showed, their standard rates that we receive from CenturyLink. It is, the deck from our last public information meetings, and this one will also be on the town website. So you can have a look to your heart's content and look at all the details.
Is CenturyLink utilizing the 62 miles that they have already installed now?
Yes, that's what's powering our DSL, right? That's why we have what we have. We're better served than some other places are, believe it or not, because we have that fiber run throughout the township. But when they put that fiber in, they put it in thinking that it was going to be always a copper project, which, you know, obviously is flawed because now we're talking about running fiber everywhere. So that's the reason we're having to put in all these access points. If they knew when they put it in that it was going to eventually end up being a fiber to the premises project, they would have put in a lot more access points. But now we're gonna have to put in access points everywhere to serve all the homes.
Option two, I think someone repeated, I just wanna make sure, includes all the way to the house.
All the way to the house, correct, yep.
So, I just did some quick math, and if I'm within quarter to half a mile of the access point, it's gonna be much cheaper for me over 20 years by $3,000 to go with option two. I don't know how many people know that. Now for the downtown area, option one, you can see it's better.
Well, that's true, and it's interesting because a lot of people that actually aren't like you and are included in option one actually feel for the people that aren't. They're like, well, that's not fair to the people that aren't gonna get it in year one. So, you know, which was gratifying to me that it wasn't like, hey, I'm in, to heck with the other people, they'll get it when they get it, right? So.
But it's a phased project. Option one is that section and the lower section for the first year. But we're not stopping, we're going on for a second, third.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, to me, the main difference is here, the township is committing, right, to borrowing the money to do the entire project. If we look at this one, they're just committing to year one. After that, we don't know what years 2 and 3 are gonna look like because there's gonna be Cat 3 funding, you know, who knows where we go with it. So, as a business owner, if I were doing it for myself, I would use phase one. You know, there's no question that would make the most sense, but when you're talking about an entire township where you're gonna have haves and have-nots, you know, there's certainly something to be said for number two.
So I don't know if this is a proper venue for this, and I don't need to get into detail obviously with it, but as somebody that's not looking at the next 5 years, okay, or looking at the next 25 years.
Right.
My one concern with project, with the number two, with the second choice and doing all at once is that my impression is that a lot of people feel it's like a crock pot meal. You store everything in and then once you get home from work, it's done. I don't have to do anything else. And as somebody that's looking to grow my business and the township and keep the township vital for the next 20 years, I don't know that that's necessarily the best way to do it, where phase one now gives us time to strategically plan what do we want Boulder Junction to be over the next 25 years. Whereas if we just get it done, well, it's done, we don't have anything else. And now when we have these meetings for strategic planning, you have 4 or 5 people here. where now we have the interest, and it seems to me that there would be a lot more planning involved in making sure that Boulder is here for the long run. Yes, I understand that some people are going to be left out of that first couple of years. Wish it didn't have to be that way, but just human nature. It seems to me that once that ball gets rolling, or that the phased in portion of it, that at the end of that 5 years, we're gonna be way further ahead and way better positioned to be successful as a township for the next 30 years. Whereas, okay, we get broadband in 1 year, what does that mean for the growth of Boulder Junction? What, it's a field of dream situation, we build it and they'll come?
Well, I think, no, I think it's really, really smart to bring that up, because there's a lot of other things that we need to do after this, right? So this particular group, which I think is somewhat technical, once we're done with this, we're looking at cellular as being the next thing that we're gonna, everybody knows cellular is an issue within the township. Once this is done, we would move on to cellular. Now, that might not really answer your question. I think what really will is, okay, once we get the broadband into town, we need to start marketing the heck out of this town, right, as a broadband-friendly town, 1 gig everywhere. We need to work on the housing piece to make sure we have enough housing for the people that will potentially move into town. So there's a lot that can be done after this, and I don't think the Economic Development Committee will rest once this is done. This is a first step, so.
It's kind of like the foundation. It's building the foundation of your home, and then to really complete that home, there's the details that you said, Matt, that need to go into that. And the whole concept is, what do we want as a community for Boulder Junction to look like in the future? And that's an important one, because marketing is pretty broad. Where do we want to market? What types of businesses do we want to invite into our township? And those are all answers that still need to be vetted, and we still need to go forward and execute.
I guess the only concern, like I said, is that the momentum is there. The fact that we got the survey back that everybody said we need to do something is great. But once everybody is served, now how much of that momentum, how much of the input from the community are you gonna lose? Because I got my broadband, that's all I need. Whereas, unfortunately, look, we all understand how people work most of the time, and you have to be pushed into something or at the edge of something, actually do something. That's where we find ourselves. I don't wanna find us there in another 5 years, because, the people that everybody has broadband, so there's no emphasis on, well, this next step, what do I need that next step for? I can watch CSI now, I'm good to go. And just trying to be realistic about it and understanding just how this works. It's very encouraging to see as many people as we have that are interested in this and wanna go forward with it. But as a business, a future business owner downtown, I don't wanna lose that momentum. I want people that are 10 miles out of town, right at the edge, that I want them to be involved in what the future of Boulder's gonna be, and not just look at, well, those counties are pushing more taxes on us.
Yeah, and I think as I reflect upon it, this could be the glue that binds Boulder Junction together, in a hardcore, and look at it from this perspective, uses it as springboard then to the future. Because this is, as we talked about in October, this is not the goal. The goal is getting new businesses, other types of diversity in here, filling our schools, giving us telemedicine, giving us teleeducation. Those are the goals. And this is a tool to get us there. We had, let's see, I'm sorry, you had a question? You had your hand up?
I had a comment.
Okay.
In option 1, 32% of people, units, whatever you want to call them, will be underserved if served at all. And business does not stop at that little map that you have drawn. Business can and will be in every single unit. We don't know, and if not business, certainly students are in every single unit. So it's not just 1 or 2 years either. It's 20 to 23, and then even at 23, if I recall from your previous presentations, everyone will not have been served by 2023. We'll probably have to go into 2024.
We're gonna show an updated timeline here in a moment. Did you have anything else you wanted to share?
The only thing I would like to say is that in your first remarks, you opened up, or perhaps it was Dennis, equated this to like electricity. Well, certainly 32% of the units do not want to wait for electricity.
Okay.
It's
Okay, well, you're gonna have your opportunity to give us that feedback. We had several others, yes, sir.
Could you explain the property tax impact, particularly for doing the entire project in 1 year?
Sure.
The 36 cents and the 72 cents for 5 years difference doesn't seem like those numbers work.
We'll show the slide we received from Bear in a moment. So with the tax impact per thousand, what we received was based upon borrowing $3.8 million. For 20 years, it'd be a 36-cent per thousand impact. For 15 years, it's 72.
On a $100,000 house, you're talking about $36 a year.
200. Yeah. So slice that in half. There were other hands up. Bill.
Yeah, I want to first of all just say I appreciate all the work you folks have done. You've obviously done a lot of work. I'm just giving you my opinion. If you flip back to the slide of the map, based on my address, as a taxpayer, I would support option 2, not option 1. Because under option 1, you're asking me to finance fiber to a select group of homes, some of which are not even going to sign up for it, right?
You're right.
You're going to run fiber to some houses and they say, thanks, but we're not interested.
Yeah.
And I'm probably looking at $2,000 to get to an access point, or I could wait 2 or 3 years, right? So if you're asking me as a taxpayer to support one of the two, I would certainly support option number 2, because then let's share the burden equally and let's make sure everybody gets access. And I asked this in the last meeting, was there ever any discussion of having some type of a hookup charge like they did when we ran natural gas through Boulder? So you got X number of feet for free, and if you were beyond that, you had to pay for it. So it's a little bit like a user fee. So if somebody says, I'm not interested in fiber, well, fine, the fiber's out on your road, and if a future property owner wants to hook up to it, they're gonna pay for it. Follow me? That helps pay for part of the project.
Yeah, it does, and that's why we've used this 600-foot threshold, because this is what CenturyLink has advised to us. So the project would pick up 600 feet, and then beyond that.
But that's 600 feet from an access point.
In
your yellow area,
phase, exactly.
In your yellow area, you're going to bring fiber to their house.
Within 600 feet, yes.
If it's more than 600 feet, they'll have to pay, even in the yellow area?
Yes, that's what we're looking at. Because, this is, somebody else asked the question about do you know how many town roads or how many private roads and what that distance really is? We don't. That's going to have to be part of the engineering of this project. Steve, you and I were talking the day before yesterday, and when you start thinking about the amount of private roads, when you have 6 or 7 or 8 people at the end of a private road, how does that really work? Those are the details that we absolutely need to work.
Yeah, so let me clear this up. Basically, in this area here and this area here, everybody gets taken care of at no charge to them. That's the way CenturyLink priced it out. We asked them to do the 600 feet, but for some reason they said, no, we're just going to run it to everybody. Part of if you look at Land O'Lakes and the way they did it, I think it was 250 feet from any public road, right? The way CenturyLink does it is from an access point. It's not really fair to do it from an access point because they arbitrarily decide where these access points go. And if you don't happen to be near an access point, you're going to have to pay over the 600 feet. That doesn't seem overly fair. So, we're kind of churning around, and I guess input from you guys would be great. How do you guys feel about it? Should everybody be taken care of regardless of where they are during this project? is that the most fair way to look at this? Or should it be, we're gonna put access points in, and if you're beyond 600 feet, then you gotta pay $1.88 a foot? You know, that's really what it comes down to.
Sir, in the corner?
If you will have exactly zero input into where the access points are, am I correct?
That is correct.
So we don't get the opportunity to see their access point map before it's all done.
Well,
To determine who's gonna have to pay that $1.88 a foot or $2 a foot. So we will have no idea before this whole thing gets started, who's paying what.
And we knew this was gonna be a sticky wicket. It's a great value because the fiber's already in the ground. And all we have to do is add the access points and people can hook up. But problems like that are gonna arise, and there's really no way we can, there's no way to handle it except for do the whole project in 2 years and maybe throw the access point part of it out and say, you know what, we're not doing the access points, we're just going to, do these until we're done with the whole township in 2 years.
There's a couple things, it's great to say, well, we'll hold off and then we'll be able to work into our planning over the years. But, first of all, the cost is obviously gonna go up. Secondly, you got a grant commitment this year. What's it gonna be next year? And what's it gonna be in the third year? And what's it gonna be in the fourth year? And then there is no guarantee you put that 1.2 up there, figuring that's the maximum you could get. Well, what if you get 500 instead of 1.2? That's gonna have to be determined at what level you get grant funding.
Well, it's complicated because we know there's gonna be likely more and more grant funding out there to do these projects. But we also know there's gonna be more and more townships doing this, especially if they look at Boulder Junction and we're successful. I mean, there's gonna be, there's gonna be more money, but there's also gonna be more townships asking for it, so I don't.
Well, at 1.2 million of that, that's a pretty good percentage if they have 24 million. That 1.2 is a pretty good percentage, and there's a whole lot more areas in the state of Wisconsin that, if they're not right now, will be trying to participate in that. I would be personally in favor, because we know what the cost is. And once you get some kind of word from your grant submission of what kind of money you're gonna get, and if we hook everybody up, nobody's gonna have to run out and pay 6, 7, couple grand just to get hooked up, because everybody's gonna get hooked up. I totally disagree with taking the thing out based on a whole bunch of variables for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and I'm sure that's what it will end up to be if we go with the partial option. So, too many variables that can change over that period of time.
Okay, thanks for your feedback. We had a couple of others. Yes.
I just have a comment to go along with what Bill is saying. There's gonna be around 400, household units with phase one that won't be getting internet. But, and when you do get internet, they're gonna be penalized because phase two says you're gonna pay for it all to the house. So if we make an average of a quarter mile away from the access point, you're talking about 500,000, or it could be up to $1 million that these 400, if they're going to do it, they gotta pay plus the per mil rate additional for phase one.
That's right, if you want it sooner or later.
So that's a big burden on those 400 people.
Well, it's a choice.
Right, and I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah, it is a choice. Go.
I was asking, do you have any guess with these two options, which one is more likely to get grants though? I mean, really, does it come down to option one, when you go get, is it, you have an equal amount of opportunity to get that money in option one, option two, or do you feel like it's more likely you'll get the money in option one versus two, or more likely to get it in option two versus
that.
Not pretty good chances,
We
right?
used our best judgment, and these are the opportunities. We cannot mind read what goes on in a commission that'll be making its decision 3 months from now.
Let me throw this out there, Dennis. I think if you look at the first one, throw the two up there. So if we look here, we can see in year one that we're both putting in the same amount of money. So the Public Service Commission is gonna say, okay, this is a partnership, CenturyLink's here, we in the town are there. If we do this approach here, and they see the town of Boulder Junction is thrown in 3.8, in my mind, they're more likely to throw in the 2.5 because we're putting in more than our 50%.
And it's not just your money, because on a webinar we had yesterday with the state, they said one of the scoring keys for them is cash contributions. And the higher that cash contribution, the higher opportunity or the higher likelihood that they give a grant. Now, here's the other side. You know, we're going back and forth here. There's always a give and take with these things. That's a big number. If you look at $48 million, that is what, a little over 5%? You know, we make our case, we have a good argument. There's no question about that. This is pushing it. It really is. But hey, you know, you don't get anywhere by just, that's right, you don't catch fish if you don't go fishing. That's what I've said my whole career. Tom.
Do you have a sense from your working and listening to the PSC and the webinars you've attended, do you have a sense as to how many other rural communities are currently in the same position as Boulder Junction? In other words, do you know what's going on for the application for this 48 million for these grants right now? Are we just a very small part of that, or is this going on all over the state? So that's going to make a difference.
Well, as Dennis said, we don't have a crystal ball, but I asked the question yesterday. How's it going? How many applications do you expect? And the gentleman that we've been working with since the beginning said, hopefully, and he just kind of trailed off, and he said, last year, 2018, we had $22 million in requests. We're hopeful that we'll get a lot of applications, and we're encouraging applications. I'm telling you what I've heard. What does that tell you? I don't know.
Okay.
Jim?
Is it possible to submit 2 funding requests on the same program and see what PSC favors?
It is possible to submit more than one application. It is. We've had a conversation about that. There's a lot of work in doing that. That's the other side of the coin. But it is possible.
I guess to the point that they were just asking behind me, I feel like we're on the front end of this new technology, this new grant. More people are probably going to be applying in the future. Maybe they're not as well organized as we are. We've got an opportunity to jump on something that maybe other communities aren't as ready to jump on.
Yeah, that's clearly true. I mean, a couple things we have going for us, you know, is we're willing to contribute. It seems like we are. The other thing is that from what we've heard, we are, if we're not the most organized, and it seems like we're way ahead of everybody else, at least close to it. We don't know what everybody else is doing.
Not being biased in any way.
No, of course not.
But see, I've got to speak up. Folks, we've got to be realistic. We need to be honest about this. Bill mentioned that they had $22 million in requests.
In 2018.
In 2018, they awarded $7 million in projects. In my mind, that means that there's at least $15 million in projects that were declined that are waiting to be filed this year. I've got to assume that they're ready. And then you combine that with whoever else has been doing work like we have. You know, we're up in the northern part of the state. Thank goodness for the team that's been doing this. But in the southern part of the state, I assume that there are a lot of people that have been working on this for the whole year. We must assume there are others that are seeking these monies. So we need to be realistic about what we ask for. That's just my personal opinion. Sorry.
Okay, let's do this. Let's take 2 more questions and then we'll move on. We've got some time for some additional Q&A. Lori?
Does the recognition that you received from the governor's office for this effort, pursuing expanded, broadband, is that something that a lot of other localities received, or is that a special honor that would buttress your request?
You mean the telecommuter forward
Correct.
certification? There aren't a lot of communities that have gone for that. You can go to the PSC website and see those communities. There are only a handful in the Northwoods.
That is a checkbox on the application.
Right, we are the only community in Vilas County that has that certification. But it is what it is.
Tom, did you have another? All right, one more, and then we'll move on. Nobody wants to be the last one in this session? Come on. All right, let's see what else we have here. All right, I don't even know if you can see that in back, but this is what we received from Baird. Thank you, Laura. And it's really the same information. The 21 cents and the 14 cents and the 72 cents and the 36 cents. So who asked the question? That's what we got. And then it breaks it out to a $100,000 home, 200, 300. So let's look at 300. So at borrowing 1.2-ish over 15 years, it's $63 a year. $42 a year if we go with 20 years.
And the monthly rate is there too.
The monthly is there too.
Yeah, $5 for the monthly impact on a home for the 15 years and $4 for 28.
And you know, you can go through these things, and we should be doing this risk assessment. Right now, interest rates are historically low. Who thinks that in the next 4 or 5 years we will not have a recession? Raise your hand. Case closed, isn't that what they say? All right.
Bill, I think one of the other things to talk about too, I kind of want to follow up on what Bill Spear said, is when somebody decides that they don't want to run fiber to their house, that's a savings to the town. We don't run it there anyway. We can't force anybody to take it. So, you know, if 20% of the people in the township say, you know what, I'm fine with my DSL, I'm going to keep what I got, they'd be out of their minds. But if they did that, that would be a savings for the town. So, the other thing to look at too is the kind of phases we went through. These are estimates. So we have what are now called cost estimates, you know, on this particular project and on the entire project. The next thing they're going to do is going to happen either today or tomorrow, where they're going to do some further analysis, and then they're going to submit it to, they call it the brain machine or something. And they stick it in there, and it comes out and says, this is exactly what the project is going to cost, we think, and here's what CenturyLink's contribution is. And then we actually build it, and that's when you actually know what the true amount is. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that the numbers we're looking at are not exact numbers. So.
Is what you're saying, you won't know what it costs until it's built?
That is correct.
Kid.
Well, let's clarify that a little bit. What we've been told is they think that their estimate is really close, within plus or
10% either way.
Okay. Once they put it into this brain machine and they start engineering it, that tightens out. Now, anybody who's built anything knows that there are some fluctuations in construction costs. If we go forward with this, we're going to have to really manage the provider. I don't care what vendor you're using, you got to manage the provider.
Is there a contingency in that number?
As far as?
As far as they're allowing for some unknowns?
Well, what he told me, yeah, what they told me is the project is between 5 and 10 million, so they chose 7.5. Not exactly a scientific way to come up with it, right? So we know that the phase 1 number is much tighter, because they actually did do some measurements and did do some analysis on that.
And as a matter of fact, I just want to go here, and we'll get to your questions in a moment. The map that we showed you is a map that we wanted to show because it's visually easier to see. We're gonna show two maps that we received from CenturyLink. There's a lot of stuff on here that can be really confusing, but this is that Boulder Junction northeast with the 3BD area, and then the residential or the living unit areas to the northeast of the 3BD. And then this is that Man Lake area, and the reason why you don't see a lot of writing on here, it's because this is currently not an area that's served by CenturyLink. It's served by Frontier. And Frontier's been non-responsive. It's just a fact. They've been non-responsive to us. And this area, if there are CAF 3 funding in future years, CenturyLink would not go after them to serve this area because they still don't infringe with federal dollars on somebody else's territory. Remember deregulation that happened in, what, 1983? Something like that? Well, still kind of out there. Let's go into, if we go with option 1, and I know there's still a couple of questions. If we go with option 1, this is phase 2 and phase 1 in 2020. The phase 2 in 2021 would be the Trout, North Trout, Gresham, Wild Rice, Island, Clear, and Big Lakes. We know enough about these projects because Steve and CenturyLink have done some work on them. All right, so when we look at investment, these are kind of similar investment years. And then in 2022, we would look to take care of all other Boulder Junction residents and living units. Somebody said it, yeah, there might be a 2023, a phase 4, where we have to clean up, do a punch list, take care of some hard to access properties. Steve, anything you want to say here?
Well, no, I think if we look at 2022, that's going to be the hard to reach areas where we think CAF 3 funding would come in handy. A couple of houses down a 2-mile road, that don't make any financial sense. Obviously we want to serve the people, but if we were to phase the thing out and we thought CAF 3 funding would take care of some of that, that's what we would use the money for.
So let's do this, sir.
You keep referring to this federal money. Okay, how do we know that's gonna be around forever?
We don't.
We don't.
There aren't any
That
insurances.
hasn't been taken into account anywhere. If you're looking at doing it all, federal money's there right now, supposedly.
Well, the federal money has already been invested into the township. And that's not going away. It's like in education, nobody's going to be able to take that away from you. So it's planted in the ground. We're just not using it because, the bits and pieces haven't been finalized. Sir. One more. Yes, I'm looking at you.
Back to the whole thing about dragging the thing out. First of all, personally, I would guesstimate that by the time this is all said and done, you're probably looking at 25 instead of 23. I don't think you're going to get a commitment out of wonderful CenturyLink, who, by the way, in my opinion, has you all right where you don't want them to have you.
What's our other option?
I guess you don't have any other option. Did their cap money pay for all that cable they've already got in the ground?
Yeah, they've used their CAF 2 money in Boulder Junction, so there's no more CAF 2 money in Boulder Junction.
They did contribute some, and CenturyLink did have a contribution to that project. They wouldn't tell me what it was.
Well, here, as far as I'm concerned about CenturyLink, it's very easy. And you're all business people, you understand this. If we're gonna talk about their contribution, they control what their contribution is by the cost, for heaven's sakes. We wanna make a bigger contribution, the cost goes up. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. So, as far as I'm concerned, they may be investing a little bit of money, but they're not gonna invest a whole lot of money, and they stand to do pretty well out of this whole project, because they're not investing very much.
Okay, let's look at it this way, right? So CenturyLink is saying Boulder Junction is served. Boulder Junction really doesn't have any other options at this point. You know, some people have to go to HughesNet or whatever it is to get their internet. So they're saying, okay, why should we invest a whole bunch of money in fiber in the town of Boulder Junction if people are paying their bills right now? They may not be happy with the service they have, but they got nowhere else to go, right? So what's the business case for CenturyLink to do it on their own or to throw a whole bunch of money at it?
Well, and
The way
this
I
is,
see it, they're not.
but let's look at the big picture here. We know that rural communities in the United States are either totally underserved or unserved by internet. That's why the federal government, through our taxes, is investing. Because guess what? Companies that require 35 to 45% gross profit are not going to invest because it's not profitable for them. So this is the only way that companies are going to do it. Just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, how many proposals did you put out to providers?
We have 5 or 6.
And then how many did you get back?
1.5.
Okay, we're such a cash cow. Right. I would expect that number to be a little bit higher.
Yeah. That's it. Jim?
From a town government perspective, what Steve said a little while ago is very alarming. And that we're going to be asked to choose one of 3 options here pretty soon, so that the grant can get submitted. How likely are we going to get a tight estimate on what option 2 is gonna actually cost?
Well, I think we've talked about that actually in the last couple of days. So, yeah, this is really news to us. The last October meeting was the first time that we ever dreamed anybody would want to do it in 1 year and spend that money. So we've kind of been, you know, doing it the best we can to come up with these other ones. If we were to do half the township next year, it would likely include, or would include, what we planned on doing in that phase project, plus whatever it took to get to 50% of the total project. And so it should be pretty tight. We should have a pretty tight estimate after today, tomorrow.
Because we looked at North Trout and Island Lake. So there's some pretty good detail about those 2 projects. And we'd have to run the numbers to see, you know, where that balances us out. Because Jim, I called Steve early yesterday morning and asked him the same question. And we would have to pivot. CenturyLink would have to pivot if that's the direction the township wants to go. But it seems like we've got some pretty good data there, and they've got some pretty good costs because we've already done some work on these areas.
Yeah, what are we at, 40%? You know, so we just need to get to 50. You know, so it's not like we need to redesign half the township.
Jim, go ahead.
Just a brief follow-up. Is it the intention of the work group here to explore securing other grant funds for this project?
It is. There are other grant funds. There are other foundation funds available, and yeah, we've got to go aggressively at it. Absolutely. Yes, one more.
Previously, I said 400 people. If we go with phase 1, I don't know how many, maybe you know better than I do, of that 68%, there's going to be a significant number of residents that we have to pay for this, being over 600 feet.
No, that 68, that would drive the 68% up. If those people actually took it, it would drive that 68% up to, you know, 70%. So the 68% is only taking into account people within 600 feet of an access point. So if more people took it, phase 1 would actually go up to 70% or 72% or whatever.
So you're saying that everyone in phase 1 will be within 600 feet?
of the 68%, right? The 68% was taking account, and again, these are just estimates, right? So that was anybody within 600 feet of a potential access point. Those people are accounted for in the 68%. If anybody wants it beyond the 600 feet, they're not included in the 68%.
That's if they don't wanna wait.
If they don't want to wait, correct.
Well, we don't know where these access points are, that's what's, that's.
Right.
See, what I'm trying to get at is that there's an initial cost for phase one. Phase two pays for all access to the homes. So how many homes in phase one will be over at 600? That's an additional cost to all those people above the mill rate. So if we knew that, and we knew what the 400 people, or 400 units, how many roads are past 600 feet, might have a better idea of saying phase two, option two is much better in the long run for everyone.
Yeah, if you look at it this way, it's gonna drive the project cost down. Anybody that's over 600 feet that says, you know what, I'll take care of the extra burial, that's gonna mean the town doesn't have to pay for it.
Well, really,
right?
Okay, well, let's move on, because I can see you start to squirm, right? You've been sitting for over an hour, so let's move on here. All right, pro et contra, pro con. We listed some, so let's just kind of go through these. And are there more? Absolutely. So for the option one, it is a lower cost, so there's less financial commitment on our part. No question, it's the highest return on investment, and Steve said that before. If you're looking at this from a business perspective, this is the one with the highest ROI. 68% of the town, it's concentrated in the areas where most of the students live. It covers one unserved area, and that's in that Man South Trout Lake. There is the CAF 3 funding potential in future phases. We've already talked through that. Time to seek other funding sources and other options, because there are other options other than using CenturyLink for the turnkey project. Okay? We can immediately market the town in the primary business area. So there are always a couple of ways to look at things. How does it affect me, and how does it affect the township? Okay, and sometimes those can be kind of at polar opposites. But I think, Matt, you kind of hit it on the head about, the marketability of what we can do here, which helps all of us indirectly. And then we believe that it maximizes the PSC funding for 2020. Downsides, need to go through this exercise again and again and again. What do we have? I think we're about 950 hours so far since February. So it's been a lot of work. Inflationary cost increases, are they going to be there? Sure they will. And then we have this long-term grant uncertainty. So that's just some of the pro cons for option one. Option two, everyone gets the fiber within 2 years. We can immediately start marketing. As soon as we start planting that fiber, we can immediately start marketing the town that we have 1 gigabit of fiber for residents and businesses, existing and new, just like Bayfield County does it. And we only work on the project for 2 years. What's the downside? Entire cost over 2 years. It's chunk money. It is. We're significantly relying upon, at least with the spreadsheet we showed you, on maximizing that PSC funding for 2 years. And then doing nothing, there's just no high-speed broadband investment. I think I asked last time, what's the cost of doing nothing? So reasons why we want to invest. This is a pretty long list, and we're not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to kind of bucket them. It's not a fire alarm, is it? Do we know what to do on a fire? Exit doors. So that first bucket is keeping people here longer. And we have heard story after story after story about if I could work from here, if I had access to the internet, I would stay here, move here, stay here longer, 3 months, 2 months, a week. That's seasonal residents as well as visitors to our community. So that's kind of bucket number one. And then this bucket number two is encouraging new folks to come here. We've got, unfortunately, we've got a lot of empty spaces on Main Street. That's not good for business. It's just not. Because things tend to breed things. When it's rainy, it tends to breed more rain. When it's dry, it tends to breed more drought. It's just kind of the nature of the world we live in. Increasing the property values. When you look at the deck, there are a couple of resources here. I'd ask you to take a look at them. We've seen a number of studies that have said if you have high-speed broadband and there's an additional kicker for up to 1 gigabit, that your property values will increase between 5 and 11%. How does that address the tax roll? Benefits all of us, no question about it. Watching TV, you can cast away your DirecTV or your dish. And then last week, our cable provider went away. So we've seen a lot of vehicles in here putting up satellite dishes and TV antennas. And some people don't have the internet to be able to stream their TV content. And all these other areas. All right, let's take a few more questions and answers, and then we're going to ask for your feedback. Everybody's tired.
More questions.
Jeff.
I just have a couple of comments. This isn't the first time that we've gone on the tax roll to try to save money in the long run, an investment that pays us back. We did it with our transfer site out here because that was so much cheaper than having people pay a monthly service fee to take the garbage away. And it's been a great investment for this community. The other thing that we have done is we went to a 7 rating on our fire department. That took an investment of additional equipment and maintaining certain things, but that has paid us back many times over. It is an investment of our tax dollars. Does that one get to everybody? Do either one of them get to everybody uniformly? The answer is no. Some people don't want to go to the transfer site. They hire somebody to take their garbage already. Some people, the fire department, the fire insurance discount of roughly, I think it's 20 or 25%, only goes within 5 miles of the fire department. You got to be within 5 miles of that fire department. But these have been investments that we have done that strongly benefit our community for what dollars we put out, what we return. This here is one of those pivotal times when we have the opportunity to do something that will strongly benefit our community for many years to come. In so many ways, it's hard to even list them all. And the cost that we're going to pay per year, when you look at what we pay for monthly fees for everything else that we have going on, it's just, this is small. This is peanuts for a big return that, and I wish I could quantify the exact number for people, but these things, it's gonna vary a little bit. But for the community as a whole, this is gonna be a tremendous return on investment, maybe 10 times what you're spending to put into it, or more. So these are things that we gotta think of real carefully and be willing to take the leap to do it before everybody else. We're kind of at the beginning here. Our competition is not near as high as it's going to be in 4 or 5 years. Whether we do number 1 or number 2, I think that has to be decided by the community, maybe some further votes or something. to decide what is the right way. I understand both sides of that argument. But I just want to say that people, let's move forward. Let's do what it takes to get this investment done to make a better life, quality of life here for all of us. That's all.
Thank you, Jeff. Someone else? I saw another hand. It's my cataracts.
I was just going to ask, is there any conversation at all going on with the community just beyond? At the last public, meeting, someone from Natural Lakes was quite eloquent in trying to encourage going beyond the township. Now, that would probably entail their township talking to you folks. Have any of those townships talked to you folks?
We have had some conversations, and we need to have more. You know, on one hand, this is a competitive situation, but on the other hand, we all help ourselves. We all help each other.
I'm concerned with West Star Lake.
Yes, and we've had some conversations there, and you know, there are some potential other options that we need to explore through fixed wireless, and you know, I mean, there's other things.
I mean, this might benefit our neighbors tying into.
Well, it will. I don't know, Steve, if you wanna go into that a bit more.
Yeah, if you look, I don't have that map in front of me, but if you look at the 385 exchange, so anybody that has a 385 prefix on their phone number is fed out of the office in Boulder Junction. So we're gonna be putting, it's called GPON equipment, but it basically allows everybody to affordably hook into the fiber. If we put that in Boulder Junction's office, which is what we have to do, anybody within the 385 exchange has the potential to hook into the fiber. So just by us doing that, we're gonna help people in the adjacent areas. To your question about out that way, you know, that's tough because we're not extending the fiber much further. Yeah, right, exactly, so.
Yeah, no, I know.
Right.
What's the timing on the PSC grants?
File deadline is December 19th at 4 p.m. Our goal is to file it on December 12th.
Any more?
I don't believe that
They
they've
haven't
said,
set
but
their
it's
time frame.
usually 2 to 3 months. So, you know, early in 2020, we'll have a pretty good idea.
Much will depend on how many applications are received by the PSC, and the gentleman yesterday was hoping they'd be swamped, was his comment.
Let's hope not.
Well, that's the situation we're in, folks. We have an opportunity, and we're either gonna grab that ball and run with it, or we're not. And if we don't, what's the cost? Personally, I think the cost is immeasurable in the negative.
Okay, 2 more. Julie?
If we don't get any grants, we're still moving forward.
That's a question you all have to answer.
I mean, if we don't get any grants, we're still paying for their money. Yes?
They would contribute to a project, yes.
Yeah, their contributions don't depend on us getting grants.
That's correct.
We just have to decide, okay, we get stumped, we still moving forward to the town board, or are we just quitting? Yeah.
That's a big difference in money that the people of the town would have to vote for.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something anybody can commit to.
Well, we don't wanna do it.
Yeah, so it would basically be, do we scale the project back, or do we kick in more money, would be the question we'd have to ask.
Well, and we're already kicking in a considerable amount of money, more than the 2.5, so it's not like we're unwilling to do that, it would just be a vote.
Right. Yep, that's exactly right.
Steve, can I just acknowledge our superintendent of the elementary school, Brent Jelinski. Brent, would you like to? You've been kind enough to come to all the meetings since day one, and we sincerely appreciate that because we understand that the children in the school are your #1 priority. If you want to.
I mean, it's been hit on many times about just looking now and in the future for education, but also for families in the area. I can't tell you how many times we've had students or families come to our school and say, this is an amazing place, but we can't find a house that has what we need, and one of their highest needs is broadband, high-speed connection. So they go to another community, like Minocqua or someplace, and they tell them, me, wow, I wish we could be up there, but we can't because our house is down here. So, I mean, we're losing families and students to other communities because they have access there. And it gives a competitive edge to all of those students that live in the area that have, access to high-speed internet. And I just wanna clarify, because I've gotten a couple calls, the school itself, we have broadband, we have 1 gig because, many years ago, there were grants put out to make sure schools were connected. So, and we're fed out of Mantush Waters there. So there was lots of questions there, but that when students leave our building, many times they're going to places that don't have high-speed connection or connection at all.
Thank you, Brent.
Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Steve, at the last town board meeting, you asked me if it'd be a problem if I'd switch from the Manitowoc Waters 543 to 385. Is that resolved? Is that part of?
It's funny, I talked to somebody yesterday and I believe he's right. I think you own your phone number, and so even if you did end up getting served out of Boulder Junction, I think you'd still be able to keep your 543 number. It would somehow be ported over.
Yeah,
So
I don't care if I keep it or not, because we use it as a building.
right.
But is that part of the equation, that you no longer have to put the T-pond in Manitowoc? You're looking to do all three?
You know, that's more of a technical thing. I don't understand in looking at the maps and where the nodes are, or the access points. I don't understand why you couldn't be 385 and we couldn't just use the GPON out of here, but that's probably a little further down the road, you know. But yes, I agree with you that it seems like you should be able to be fed out of 385.
So then both options, they include the GPON and Manitowoc, or how you figuring that?
They did initially. They said that they included the equipment in Manitowoc Waters. So again, you know, that's part of the engineering phase of it. Whether it's possible for you to be fed, I guess the problem I see is that if you're fed out of Boulder Junction and then your neighbor is still being fed with DSL out of Manitowoc Waters, it might get messy. You know, it might have to be all or nothing, but I don't know.
So,
You know?
Yeah, and that's.
It shouldn't be a problem, so it's just they want it. We're talking.
Well, that's part of the details in the engineering that we need to get to. Okay, you've been really good about feedback so far. We have some more for you. Now, don't think about the last one, because we wanted to see if you were paying attention, so we kind of turned these around. All right, option 1 is the option 1 on the spreadsheet, and that is to do that phase 1 project where we cover Village, Boulder Junction, Northeast, South Troutman, and the access points that give us the 68% coverage for 3.1. Now that's the big number. These numbers do not include the supplier contributions or the grant funding. You want to just keep it, you know, that's the bunch we're looking at. So that's option 1. Option 2 is to do the whole town in fiber to the premise in 2 years, or about 7.5 million. And then option 3 is we do not support investment in high-speed broadband. And if we could ask this time, only fill out the survey if you're an elector, a taxpayer, a business owner, or an employee of a business in Boulder Junction. I know we have some folks here from surrounding areas. We want to get this tighter to understand our level of support. Yes, Laura?
Just to clarify, for option 1, the 3.1 million, that is for the first year, and then additional funds would have to be committed for following years.
It's a multi-phase project to get the entire township served.
Have you figured out what that estimate would be?
I'm sorry.
For all phases to be done?
That's who we heard, you know, there's grant funding and everything else.
Well, I mean, is it gonna be less than 7.5 million?
We don't know that. We don't know. Oh, okay. All right, so we're gonna pass these around. Take your time, fill them out, and one more, Julie, go ahead.
This is very important.
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. And then when you're done with your surveys, if you would plant them in this box, please, that'd be great. And thanks for your input.